live from the Day Studio, 200 State Street in New London, Connecticut. It is the ECC Wrestling Preview. We're very excited to have the face of the ECC Wrestling Tournament, Dave Nowakowski, on with us. Saturday, live from Killingly High School, a one-day event brought to you live streaming on game day. CJ Saddy will be right next to me, the eye candy of game day sports. We've got sponsors with Giordano Restoration, Tint My Ride, Lewis Jump, and Saddy Family Trees. So we're going to have a full support from the community, and the wrestling community will turn out. And Dave, as always, the ECC, a very competitive conference, turning out wrestlers that compete not only at the state level but throughout New England. And, the attention turns fully to wrestling on Saturday as the championships, start. Let's talk a little bit first about some changes. I mentioned it's a one-day event. You also can talk about the divisions as well. So let's just talk about changes from previous years to this one.
Sure. Until a few years ago, we had to do it as a two-day event because NFHS rules had a 5-match per day limit. When they changed that to a 6-match per day limit, it was essentially done to allow a 16-man bracket to be completed in one day. So most of the conferences that are 16 teams or less kind of shifted over to the one-day event. It helps on, cost and logistics and everything else, and people are happy to get it done in one day. Some of the bigger conferences, the CCC still does it as a two-day event because they have more than 16 teams. But that change from the 6-match to the 6-match limit allowed us to do it in one day. And the other thing this year, we're also sticking with a fairly early start. Last year was necessitated by a prediction of snow, which ended up coming true. And we had to kind of rush the tournament along on a speedy schedule to get it done before the snow came in. And some of the people were happy with that format in terms of getting workers and everything else needed up at the host site, Killingly, to put it on. So the ADs decided to go with the fairly early format, whereas the finals are now scheduled for 2 o'clock. And if we're on schedule, as I hope to be, that's when we'll be putting our finalists out on the mat. At the same time this year, different than the past broadcasts from game day, the 3rd and 5th place matches will also be running concurrently on 2 other mats. So, a lot going on at once.
So last year when it was a 2-day event, how many matches would you wrestle on Friday and how many matches would you wrestle on Saturday?
Last year we had switched to the one day, but prior to that, Friday night would typically be what we'll call the round of 16 and the quarterfinals, and then we'd be jumping into semifinal action and wrestlebacks on Saturday. So Saturday was they were both not excessively long days, and now we shoot to get it done, and wrestling starting around 8:30 in the morning, and we're going to be done around 4 in the afternoon. So it's a fairly long day, as most wrestling tournaments tend to be, but getting it done in one day definitely keeps the cost under control for the ECC and the host site.
Now, I thought the early start was because everybody wants the fantastic breakfast sandwiches at the Killingly High School concession stand.
You threw me off there for a minute, Peter, because I thought you were going to talk about some of your favorite soups that they might offer there at the wonderful concession stand up at Killingly. Because I know you're a soup connoisseur from some of our, is it French onion, I believe? We got to bring you a pair of scissors or something for that, if I recall some of your football conversations in the fall. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, where I thought you were going with that is the other reason that some of the people involved are happy with the earlier start is, I don't know if you're aware, but this year's tournament falls on February 14th, which holds some significance to some folks, being that it is Valentine's Day. I'm going to give you that kind of reminder. I know there'll be some who will poo-pah that, but it's kind of the same thing when, like, if your volleyball fall finals fall on Halloween, it's going to impact your attendance, going to impact a lot of people's lives. And we try to not be a negative influence on people's lives and their relationships with their spouses and things like that. So I think the early start should allow most people involved to at least have some type of a Valentine's dinner plan at a reasonable hour if they so choose. Not that that was the primary reason. I'm just saying it's one of the benefits of the earlier time.
So for those that out there who are not wrestling, traveling wrestling parents or fans, is 6 matches in a day a lot or typical for some of these kids as far as what they might be facing during the course of the season?
Most will not see 6 matches. The only way you would see 6 matches if you were a wrestler who didn't have a bye in the round of 16, and with roughly typically 12, 13 kids in a bracket. There's usually a couple buys, which are generally the top seeded kids. And you'd have to kind of have a first round match and then probably wrestle above your seed, so to speak, working your way back through the consolation bracket, in which case your 3rd/5th place bout would be your 6th match of the day. If you're in the championship finals, in all likelihood, in most scenarios, you had a bye in the round of 16, you wrestled in the quarterfinals, you wrestled in one in the semifinals, and you're wrestling your 3rd match in the finals. So a fairly large disparity between if you're in the championship finals versus if you had to work your way back through those consolation brackets and perhaps maybe being your 6th match for 3rd and 5th. A lot of those matches don't go 6 minutes on the championship side or even go 5 minutes on the consolation side. And sometimes you might pick up a forfeit along the way, which doesn't really count towards your match count. The only other thing that you might see a couple kids a little bit more fatigued is one of the great benefits to speeding up tournaments is they went from a 45-minute required minimum rest between matches to 30 minutes. And it may not sound like much, but it really has a tremendous overall impact on the duration of an event such as this and any of the other regular season tournaments. It allows you to get done in a much more reasonable time frame. But, sometimes the kids are coming up saying, what do you mean I'm on deck? I just wrestled. And it's all computerized now. So you can pull up and say, your idea of just wrestled and our idea of just wrestled might be a little bit different. But trust me, we're not going to call you out there before you get that 30 minutes. It may not seem like 30 minutes to you, but trust me, it's been 30 minutes.
So let's talk a little bit about the teams this year that have shown themselves to be, favorites or contenders for the overall team championship. I think, over the years we have seen, the Killingleys of the world have been there every year, but each year there's always a 2nd or 3rd team in a given season, whether, it's Ledyard, East Lyme, schools have always, Wyndham has been, very competitive. Who are the schools to watch this year for an overall championship?
Well, you have the overall championship, for which there's an award for that. And this also does contribute to this year 2 divisional championships, broken down where your regular season record against the teams within your division counts towards half and your ordinal placement here in the tournament counts towards the other half, which does sometimes create the scenario of co-champs if you lost to someone in a duel, but then you finish ahead of them in the tournament. Or I believe we even had the one year where there were the 3 co-champs, and you had a team that won neither the regular season nor the tournament, but they were 2nd in the regular season and they were 2nd in the tournament. And because 1st and 3rd were 3rd and 1st, it created a 3-way kind of odd tie. Not that could happen again, but as far as the overall tournament title, you have to start with Killingley. Typically, the host school does a great job up there. Coach Bowen has been there for longer than I've been doing this, so it means it's a pretty long time. And he has a lot of good assistants. He's got a good youth program up there, and those are some of the keys to success. They have kids that come in as freshmen who are winning the ECCs, scoring a lot of points, and that doesn't happen everywhere, and that's another case this year. They've got some strong underclassmen. I think they're a fairly young team, to be honest, this year, but they do have some holes. They have some holes in their lineup that aren't always the case, and sometimes they can be found in a dual meet. They had a wonderful dual meet season, only a couple of losses to Foreign, and I forget who else, maybe Bristol East, and I could be wrong, but a really strong dual meet season. And I'd have to label them, as the favorites going in. But you mentioned Ledyard. Ledyard's got a very strong team this year. They've got some studs who will definitely be in the finals, and they have some depth that could, wrestlebacks are always the key in these tournaments. I don't know. There's 2 ways to win a tournament. You can, or in a hybrid. I've seen teams win a tournament with 5 or 6 finalists and no other place winners. We've seen teams win tournaments with no finalists and 11 high place winners. So there's a couple different routes that happened last week. The CCC, New Britain won their first CCC tournament. They had no finalists. Kind of an odd way to get there, but they wrestled back well and just by a half point edged out Glastonbury, Bristol Eastern, someone. So the different ways to get there. And I would also think that East Lyme has some strong individuals. They're going to do some pretty good team scoring. I think Waterford has tremendous depth, and I think they could surprise some people if they can wrestle back well. You may not see a ton of Lancers in the finals on the game day broadcast, but you're probably going to see quite a few of them wrestling on mat 2 and mat 3 in those 3rd and 5th place bouts. And Coach Gamble and the crew down there, I think, could definitely be in the mix. And I always say, watch out for Lyman. That Lyman Wyndham Tech cooperative there, they're always exciting. Coach Strout is always exciting and fun to watch. And you don't sleep on them. They're going to be in a battle for the Division II title, because I believe Griswold knocked them off in a dual meet this year. So that could come down to, Griswold Lyman on that side of things. And on the Division I side, Killingly enters in with the essentially undefeated top seed, so to speak, based on their dual meet record. They almost got a little help last night. A close match. Killingly had a close match with East Lyme last night. Had a couple real tight matches go their way, and they pulled off a win despite a few kids being out with, this time of year, as always, sickness and weight issues, whatever it might be on any team. But they were able to pull out that win over the Vikings, which makes Ledyard's road a little bit tougher. It really could have almost come down to whoever finished higher on Saturday. But now Ledyard would need to win to be co-champs, or win and see Killingly bumped down beyond second to claim sole rights to the team title.
So let's talk about some of the wrestlers to watch. I've always found the ECC fascinating because, and this has been the case since I was in high school 1,000 years ago as well, which is because of the state divisions, there are kids that don't win the ECCs that go on and win state championships and state opens, having to come back and beat the kid that they lost to in the ECC. So we have wrestlers in the ECC that are not just ECC quality champions, but will be looking for state division championships, state open championships, New England championships, which I think is, again, we are considered a good conference statewide. Our top teams send a lot of good wrestlers forward. So who are some of the kids in the ECC this year that might be having the kind of season that would project them even past an ECC championship to state and New England style?
Sure. ECC wrestling has always been traditionally one of the stronger statewide sports as how they've been competitive. I mean, it was a long time ago, but there was a year when all 4 divisional champions were ECC schools. That probably won't happen again, and part of that is our enrollment numbers are kind of down. The vast majority of the ECC falls in Class S, and a few of them fall in Class M. A couple of co-ops have, Fitch with their new co-op this year with Stonington Grasso has bumped them up a little bit, but as always, NFA is like the only double L school. So you're right. A lot of these kids will face each other at the ECCs, and they'll see each other again either at the S's or at the Class M tournament. And individually, we do have a New England champ, a returning New England champ, Boxley from Ledyard, took New England's as a freshman last year, so you'd have to consider him to be the highest achieving ECC wrestler going into the tournament. But there are other, state open place winners from last year who are in the tournament this year, as well as some exciting freshmen. As always, freshmen coming in like Boxley did last year can make an impact. The Ledyard 113, Jolly is probably going to be looking at a final at 113 if things go according to seed, and his opponent there would be a freshman from freshman Killingly. So you could have an all freshman final at 113. You never know how brackets might break up. And again, we have our seeding meeting tonight, so when I talk about projected seeds, it's just based on how I have seen results and kind of a prediction of where they might be seated. Nothing will be determined prior to our seeding meeting tonight. But then you've got another state open place winner last year, Case from Ledyard this year. He was East Lyme Norwich Tech co-op wrestler last year, but he's at Ledyard this year, and he was a state open place winner last year. He'll be in the mix at probably 120, 126, 132, in that range. There's always there have been years where people have strategically placed a kid at a different weight for the ECC tournament than they might do for the upcoming state tournament. Because the state tournament locks you into the states, the state open, New England's and all that. But the ECC, it's not part of a progression. So there have been years where strategically someone might bump up their best kid to score more points, or score the equal number of points by winning, but maybe at a different weight where they're now putting a kid who was favored to win at a higher weight in a position where the best they might be able to do is second. So it used to be a lot of jockeying for where you're putting your kids. We kind of have it now where you've got to submit your kids and everybody's kind of locking them in blindly by 5 o'clock today. And that's where we expect your kid to go. So it's not like, wait a minute, I'm going to move wrestler A from 132 to 138. And then team B says, well, if you're going to do that, I'm putting my kid, and then that's no fun for anybody. So try to have kind of the blind lock in. Heavyweight could be a really exciting weight class. You've got a returning state open place winner from Waterford, Cooper down there, but he's been beaten twice this year by East Lyme's heavyweight Palermo. And, a couple of those guys at East Lyme in the upper weights were stuck behind two really high performing kids from East Lyme the last couple of years who were New England caliber wrestlers, who are off wrestling in college, and now having a chance to kind of show themselves there at that weight. And there's a couple of other weight classes that I think could be really exciting. You've got 120, I think could be a pretty exciting final. All the finals are typically good. I'm trying to think. I jotted down some notes. You've got Troy Torres Mori for Wyndham, also a returning, pretty highly ranked. Ranking is all subjective, but there's a couple of guys who used to coach at Ram who do a pretty nice job doing their rankings. They try to put them out each week, and they work hard tabulating all the results and putting things together and noting who beat who. And, again, it's subjective, just like your ECC basketball weekly rankings might be. And it's fluid. It's a fluid list, as Stephen A. might say. But they've got a handful of ECC kids ranked fairly high. And we're always hoping that not only we have a good tournament here, but even though I'm kind of a tournament director on a statewide level, deep down, I'm pulling for those ECC kids because it's an area that typically we're not seeing the same level of financial benefits that some other parts of the state can see in terms of hiring middle school coaches, making sure, kids who want to go to off-season camps can go to those camps and all that. And, it impacts all the other sports too. The money is where the championships typically fall. There's been studies on that, and it kind of is the way it is. But wrestling's been fairly immune to that, and we hope that the ECC can, have a good weekend here and then have a good next 3 or 4 weekends as well.
Over the past few years, we've seen some incredible performances. You mentioned East Lyme last year, obviously Lincoln Carlson, Braden Solo. We've seen James Linder. We've seen going back to Malachi Fowler and Soren Reef in what was the Titan versus Titan. We've had the benefit of some incredible I guess it's the wrestler of the day. What is the title called? The outstanding wrestler.
Yeah.
Who are some candidates in your mind for that? Who are the guys who? And you mentioned obviously you got an all New England champion in Boxley. Obviously, I would imagine that he would be in position for something like that. But who are some guys that people should pay attention to who could put themselves into like sort of the the outstanding wrestler category?
Sure. When the coaches typically vote on that, there's a couple different ways you see it. I think we word it as the outstanding wrestler of the tournament, and some people look at it as who is truly the most outstanding and dominant wrestler. But a lot of them are going to look at it as, listen, if you get a kid who's a 6th seed and he's coming in, not expecting to perhaps be in the finals, and he gets to the finals and he pulls off a pretty big upset over a consensus number one, that's gonna generate some votes. Is he maybe the most outstanding wrestler of the tournament? Maybe not, but his performance on that day would earn him plenty of votes along those lines. So while it's tough to predict those, there's also some of the coaches will say, listen, Boxley. Okay, let's make the assumption. Being a New England champ, he is the most awarded,
yes,
highest accolades, and most deserving, if you were to say, outstanding wrestler. But in his weight class, it's possible. I'm not saying this is true. It's possible that some of the other elite kids, once they saw what weight Lucas Boxley was going, they may have decided to work hard and drop a weight, or maybe stay fat and happy and go up a weight. So, and again, I haven't seen the brackets, I haven't seen the weights, I haven't seen the entries, but there might be a situation where somebody's weight class isn't as deep as some other weight classes. And when someone like that creates the opportunity for kids to maybe see greener pastures, it can sometimes make those peripheral weights very deep. And you might have a weight where there's 4 or 5 returning state place winners. And there'll be coaches who'll say, listen, this kid who won that weight class had to go through a little tougher gauntlet, and maybe, I'm gonna vote for that kid. So, until I see where people are putting people, that scenario might be a little tougher to say. But 120, I think, could be, if the 2 of the top seeds, you got Stimson from East Lyme, Norwich Tech, and you've got one of the Jonash brothers from Killingly. They didn't meet during the season, so that's a final that I'd be looking forward to. And I always look for exciting finals. I hate a scoreless first period, and the crowd doesn't like a scoreless first period.
The announcers don't like it either, by the way.
The announcers don't like a score. And it used to be that you'd be saying, stop wrestling like heavyweights, But we've seen some pretty high-scoring, exciting heavyweight matches, and we've seen some pretty boring, tentative lightweights. I would like nothing better to see a lot of our finals be in that 12-10 range, where there's action and there's scoring, and the refs generally do a pretty good job of trying to force the action and caution stallings and make the kids wrestle and see some scoring. So I don't want to say it's good for ratings, because people are watching their kids wrestle no matter what, and grandparents, wherever they are in Florida, tuning into game day to watch the action. But we'd like to see some action. I don't know. 165. I think you did a little feature on Naeem from NFA the other day. If you can get to the finals, it might be Padilla from Killingly. That could be an exciting final there. These kids have seen each other most of the time. Our ECC opponents have seen each other during the season, whether it's been a dual meet matchup or a lot of them. See a lot of the same faces at the Lancer tournament or the Lima Memorial Casey Yates tournament or the Grizzle tournament. So, or even if it's a far away tournament, there's a good chance. It doesn't happen often that these guys get to a final and they haven't met before. But we'll find out on those bio sheets that we'll hand to you and Sadie up there, so they can see what they got.
I like the light. I've always loved the lighter weights, because it looks like 2 hummingbirds. Usually, that's what I want. I want I want the throws and the shooting of the legs, the takedowns. I want. And what Peter and I, doing the grade 8 this year, have seen more wrestling submissions of, I don't know that I've ever seen, you get one spladle and the next thing you know, it's a spladle fest every week. We get 6 kids sending them in.
Yep.
But I think like every other sport, the level of training is better for a lot of these. The availability of training is higher for these kids. These kids can train year-round in a way that was not available in years past. So you should be seeing better conditioned athletes, stronger athletes for their weight classes. The question is, from the technical side, are they as technically sound, or is there a disparity amongst the higher, the lower seeds, the better, higher ranked wrestlers and the lower ranked wrestlers from a technical standpoint? Because I do feel like we're seeing Every time I see a really cool wrestling move that I've never seen before, I ask myself, is that because this is some senior who's got some poor freshman on the mat, and we're seeing a hibachi throw? I just made that one up here, by the way.
Very nice.
Hibachi throw is the shrimp that gets thrown at the that I catch in my mouth. So talk a little about the level of technical expertise.
Yeah, I would say you're probably right on seeing. You're more likely to see things you haven't seen before in an early round. Mismatch maybe isn't the proper term, but in a higher disparity of seeds,
sure,
where one is heavily favored, you might see some things you haven't seen. Most of the time, you get to the finals, and this is true at college NCAA finals. It comes down to the basics and who executes the basics better. Able to get the escape, able to get the takedown, whatever it takes. Good defense, good riding, good tilts, and it's always, you mentioned the lightweights as hummingbirds, and you mentioned Lincoln from East Lyme last year. He was one of those rare kids that started out his career as like a 126 pounder. Yeah. So he had, I don't want to say lightweight technique, but he had the skills of a lightweight, and then he grew, and those skills went with him as he progressed through those upper weight classes. And that's not often the case. Typically, most kids, if you're at 190, 215, or 285, you've almost always been the biggest kid in the room, and you've mostly wrestled other big kids, and maybe you've excelled at certain big kid moves that don't maybe vary as much as some of the lighter weights. But when you see something like what Lincoln did, it was enjoyable seeing his skills. And the one thing I kind of will miss this year, I think the crowd a couple years ago, speaking of the lightweights, when you had Tatiana in there from Ledyard,
yes,
it's always a little bit interesting when you have the elite girls in the mix. And top of my head, I don't know that we have that scenario this year. What we do have is they are running a separate ECC girls tournament at New London tomorrow being Thursday. I believe there's about 40 girls signed up, running that down at New London. Some of those same girls will compete as part of their varsity team on Saturday at the ECC. So that will be their second competition of the week, and season limits and all that good stuff. And typically you find that at some of the lower weights where the girls are typically more competitive against the boys. That dynamic changes as you get up above 132. And so the physicality of it. But there are some girls, NFA's 215, Tatiana Taylor, she's going to do well in the girls tournament. She's had some pretty decent success this year against the boys up at 215. And, there are others in those weight classes, but I enjoyed, and the crowd, put it this way, I always felt bad for the boy facing Tatiana, because unless you were that school and cheering for that kid, chances are all of the neutral party fans, they're pulling for Tatiana.
100%.
And it is what it is. It adds a little excitement, but I always felt a little bad for that opponent because they didn't get just the Ledyard fans. They got all the neutral site fans on their side.
Yeah, you mentioned Lincoln Carlson and the skills changing, because I equate that to in basketball. You get the kid who's got the point guard skills, and then they shoot up and they're 6'5", 6'6", and now you got a big guy that's got all these skills that he's not supposed to have, versus the kid that's always been the biggest kid, and then when everyone catches up, he doesn't have the same skill set. I've always been fascinated how the lightweight classes are always, filled with freshmen and sophomores, because you don't get a lot of upperclassmen who can stay at 100 and blank pounds, those one. And so, when you
that
get
was
a
big
kid,
debate. I mean, a couple of years ago when the NFHS decided to redo their weight classes, they took an odd approach, and they allowed states to choose from essentially 12, 13, or 14 weights, because the numbers were down a little bit, particularly in the ends of the bell curve, particularly at the lower weights and at the upper weights. And some states chose to go with 12. Some wrestling powers, Pennsylvania, New York, some chose with 13. Connecticut and New England kind of went together and decided to stick with the 14. We still see far too many forfeits, particularly at the ends of the spectrum. And like you said, you got a lot of the underclassmen, usually 106, 113. And so every now and then you get a senior who sticks around there for a while, like like Cosman did a few years ago at Fitch, but most of the time it's populated by the younger kids. And if you go to some of the JV tournaments, or you look at the total numbers of kids wrestling statewide, 80% of them are in the 126 to 180 range. You've got much smaller numbers at the end of the curve, but it's hard to say, geez, if you make the first weight 110, are you really penalizing those kids who are 100 pounders? It seems like as a culture, people are bigger, and I'm not just talking about adults and GLPs and all that. I'm talking about the average high school age kid. There used to be a fair number of 95 pounders, kids who came into high school wrestling at 90 pounds, and it was a 91 pound weight class that we had an exhibition weight back in the 80s and 90s. We do an exhibition weight of 99 pounds for the ECC tournament. I think there's only 2 kids this year in the 99 pound exhibition weight class. Granted, some schools may have a 99 pounder they had to insert in the varsity lineup, and they don't have another kid to put there. But the numbers at that low end of the spectrum are down a little bit for whatever reason.
Well, it's funny. That's what happened when I was in high school. I came in at 105, and there was a really great wrestler so I decided to go fat and happy, and I ended up as a heavyweight within 6 months, and then just didn't wrestle, and then never lost any of the weight. So I can remember how how that started. I blame Coach DePeter for before
I didn't see Fran. How's Fran doing, by the way? When I went to a New London match this year, I often see him on the score clock, and I did not see him this year, so I just hope he's doing well.
I haven't seen him. I see him in baseball season. His grandson Desmond Powers is a elite athlete at St. Bernard and a big baseball player. So hopefully this spring. Speaking of grandparents, so that's a good segue for my last question for you, which is, in this event we get 2.
I was insulted for a moment. I have the hat on.
No.
The hat,
you got more hair than me. You're good.
There, but I'm not. I can't claim grandparentage.
No, we get 2.
I know that's not where you were going, but I just wanted to cut you off quickly. But
no, you're good.
Back to your story.
No, we get 2 types of fans for the wrestling. We get the wrestling fans, the people who have grown up as wrestlers, or the parents of kids who have been going to wrestling tournaments since the kids were little. So they're, that's group A, and they're the ones who value CJ and his insight, and people like you who can speak to the nuances that and they're the expert level, if you will. The other half of the people we get are the family members and friends who don't know a spladle from a Blintz or a cream-filled donut, and are watching because they're interested in how that person does, and they don't know a thing. And that's where CJ's also great, because he's able to speak Wrestling 101. So my question for you is, to that group, to the people who are not the expert level, what's the thing you would want them to look for during the course of the game day matches, if they're going to tune in and watch them all and not just their kid? What's the thing that the average I don't know much wrestling fan should look at and appreciate?
Well, hopefully just taking some enjoyment in the action, and hopefully finding the action on the mat, because the casual fan, and this is a struggle for the NCAA, it's a struggle for everybody. Viewership, if there's not scoring, if there's not action, viewership is down. For the casual fan, they don't want to see 0-0 going into the third period. So as long as there's some action, even if they don't understand the scoring, maybe not understand a particular move, they'll see that something's happening. And as long as something's happening, they should be fairly entertained. But if nothing much is happening and there's just a lot of pushing and shoving, and no one wants to give up those first points, you can understand why they may be a little inclined to say, what's going on? Not much here. To me, the biggest thing with the new, because you get some people who are new to the sport as high school athletes, and I wish we had more of that, because as much of the youth wrestling is wonderful, don't get me wrong, youth wrestling, middle school wrestling, all of that, I think there is probably a fear of a lot of high school freshmen who say, I can't wrestle. I've never wrestled before. Yeah, are you going to take your lumps your first year? Sure. Are you going to be varsity? Probably not, unless you're a lightweight or a heavyweight and they got nobody there. But give it time. Give it a couple of years, and you're going to be competitive. Are you going to make up all of that gap from the kid who's been wrestling on a private club since he was 4? Maybe not. But you're probably going to be able to close that gap and be very, very competitive. But some of them are hesitant. It's not like basketball. If you've never dribbled a basketball, you're probably, unless you're, 6'11", you're probably not being encouraged to go out for the basketball team. It's just not going to translate. It's different with wrestling. But what I'm tying into this is you get some parents and they've never experienced wrestling before. And watching them watch their kids wrestle, especially early in the season, is tremendously entertaining because they don't know what's going on. And their biggest concern is don't get hurt. Oh my, it was at a tournament a few weeks ago. There was a mom, she couldn't watch. I mean, it was her kid wrestling, but as long as they were just moving, she's watching. Soon as there was any kind of contact, you could just see the way she would kind of close her eyes and look the other way. I think she just had this innate fear that the kid was going to land badly and there would be some blood or bruises or whatever it might be. And I'm not going to lie, there you come out of this tournament, very few are going to walk off the mat on Saturday at the end of the day who aren't sore, who don't have some new bruises, some new sore spots, and maybe didn't have a bloody nose or a bloody lip over the course of the day. So just try to appreciate the coaches know what they're doing, the trainer is there, she knows what she's doing, the referees, they know what they're doing. Everyone's there to have a healthy, safe environment for the kids on the mat, and appreciate the action. If you hear the people around you cheering, go ahead and cheer. They may know a little more than you, and maybe you'll be fortunate enough to be sitting in the stands next to someone like Brian Crudden. And then if you just base your reactions on what Coach Crudden is doing, you'll look like you know what you're doing.
Well, I have learned more over the last 5 years from doing exactly that, just sitting next to CJ and listening to the coaches. And so it is a great day. We're looking forward to it. Peter, do you have any questions before we let Dave go? Saturday, the finals are due to start at what time? 2 o'clock?
You're asking me or Peter? I think it's 2 o'clock is
Yeah.
our 2 o'clock is our goal. We'll do our best
All
to
right.
stay on schedule.
Well, I'm not going to be there in the beginning, so I'm relying on you to get everything good so that we can get off, on air at 2 o'clock. But doors open early at Killingly High School, and it is a full one-day event. It's also Valentine's Day, so get your flowers and your candy and your reservations ahead of time. Go watch some great wrestling, or stay and watch it on game day live before you head out for your dinner reservations. Dave will be there, making sure it runs smoothly. We'll be there, giving you all the best wrestling action we can. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. And
thank you, guys. If I recall, you also typically like to have a little time after each championship final to interview the champion there,
yes.
right?
Yes, we do.
So that's always a little added bonus to get to see the interviews, and I'll try to remind the kids that that'll be happening so they're all prepared for that.
And Sports Doctor will do his best to let the kid not hyperventilate. It's always fun when the kid just came through a overtime win, and the kid can't breathe and he's got a microphone in his mouth. But we've seen some of the great part about it is there's nothing more genuine than the emotion you get as the kid comes off the mat. We've seen some, again, I referenced Malachi Fowler. We've seen some of the best interviews we've ever had out of the kid, just the genuine joy of having just won and realizing that all that work that you've put in just paid off. So we love capturing it. We love bringing attention to the great sport of wrestling. The athletes we'll see on Saturday. Dave, thank you so much. We'll see you on Saturday, and we're ready for a big day.
Hey, always appreciate game day being up there and providing the opportunity for the folks who can't make it to be able to watch online. So thank you so much.